So, here we are, me, Nate, Sarah, Emily, Kevin, and Brian, rolling into this tiny, nowhere town called Cedar Hollow. It's the kind of place you only see in old horror movies, with one gas station, a diner that probably hasn't changed its menu in 50 years, and a population of like 300. You know the type. The air smells like damp pine and everything's kind of too quiet, if that makes sense. But honestly, we were too pumped for the weekend at Camp Greystone to care. We pile out of the car, stretching our legs. The whole drive up, Nate couldn't stop going on about some crazy trail he found online, something about epic views and old ruins, whatever. I wasn't paying much attention, just happy to get away for a bit. But of course, Cedar Hollow had to have its token creepy town warning moment. Right as we hit the diner, the locals start looking at us like we just stepped into their sacred land or something. You ever see those horror movies where the townies give the newcomers the stink eye? Yeah, that. We grab a booth and I can feel the eyes on us. No one's saying anything outright, but you know how it is. Small town vibes. We order burgers and fries, and just as the food hits the table, this old woman waddles up to us. She's ancient, like probably saw the Civil War, ancient, with a face that looks like a leather bag. She stares at us for what feels like forever before croaking out, "You're not camping near the forest, are you?" I exchange a look with Sarah, trying not to laugh. "Yeah, actually," I say. "Camp Greystone. Why?" Her eyes narrow, and she leans in way too close for comfort. "Don't go there." I'm about to make some smart-ass remark when Brian, always the peacekeeper, jumps in. "Thanks for the advice, ma'am, but we'll be fine. We're just here to relax, not stir up any trouble." She doesn't even blink, just keeps staring right at me like I'm the one that's gonna cause all the problems. And then she says the weirdest thing. "He'll hear you. He always does. You don't want to call what's sleeping." Okay, now she's officially crossed over into crazy old lady territory. But it's creeping Emily out. I can see it on her face. Before I can respond, the waitress pulls her away, apologizing, and the woman hobbles off, muttering something under her breath. The whole diner goes back to normal like nothing happened, but I swear I feel this chill crawl up my spine. Weird. We finish up, pay the bill, and head back to the car. Nate, of course, is already making jokes about how we're going to end up as ghost stories or some shit. I laugh it off, but deep down, I can't shake what the old lady said. Still, whatever. It's just a weekend, right? We'll be fine. Or so I thought. By the time we hit the dirt road leading to Camp Greystone, the sun's already starting to set. You know how the sky turns that weird mix of orange, and purple, and everything looks kind of eerie? Yeah, it was that kind of vibe. But honestly, we were all still buzzing from the drive, cracking jokes, messing with the radio, trying to see who could pick up a signal out here in the middle of nowhere. Spoiler, no one could. The camp itself wasn't anything special, just a couple of old cabins, a fire pit, and trees. A lot of trees. The place was half run down, like it hadn't seen anyone in years, which I guess made sense since it was off-season or whatever. But still, there was this weird stillness, like even the wind didn't bother blowing through here. We unload the car, set up our tents, and I can tell that everyone's getting a little on edge, even if no one wants to admit it. Kevin, always the over-prepared one, starts talking about building a fire, but Brian's already wandering off with his camera, trying to catch some artsy shots of the woods. Emily and Sarah are laying out the food, chatting, but every now and then I catch them glancing towards the forest. I don't blame them. The trees here are different. They're tall, yeah, but they lean in this unnatural way, almost like they're bending toward us, like they're watching. I know it sounds stupid, but the whole place felt wrong. Still, I wasn't about to let some creepy trees ruin the weekend. We came out here for adventure, right? Nate suggests we check out some trails before it gets too dark, and of course, being the idiot I am, I jump at the chance. "Sure," I say, "let's see what this place has to offer." So we grab a couple of flashlights and head out, cutting through the woods. It's quiet, too quiet, and the deeper we go, the more I'm regretting it. There's this thick fog creeping in, making it hard to see more than a few feet in front of us. And those symbols we saw earlier, they start popping up everywhere. Carved into the bark, scratched into the rocks. At first, Nate's laughing it off, calling them wannabe Blair Witch stuff, but I can tell he's starting to get freaked out too. And then, out of nowhere, we hear it, drumming. Faint at first, like it's far off, but it's definitely there. A steady, rhythmic beat echoing through the trees. Sarah stops dead in her tracks, and for the first time, she looks genuinely scared. You guys hear that? We all nod. No one's laughing now. The sound's getting closer, and I swear to God, I can feel it vibrating in my chest. Nate turns to me, his voice low, barely above a whisper. Maybe we should head back. But before I can agree, something else cuts through the air. A whisper. Close. Too close. And it says my name. Jake. I froze. It wasn't just any whisper. It was my name. And it wasn't like someone calling from across the camp. No, it felt like the sound was right next to me, like whoever, or whatever, said it was breathing down my neck. My heart nearly jumped out of my chest, and for a split second I thought I was imagining it. But the look on Nate's face told me he heard it too. Dude, what the hell? Nate's voice cracked as he whipped around, shining his flashlight through the trees. The fog had gotten thicker and the beam barely cut through it. Who's screwing with us? I wanted to say it was just a prank, that maybe Brian was hiding in the trees trying to mess with us, but I knew that wasn't it. Brian was back at the camp with the others, or at least he was supposed to be. And besides, that whisper, it didn't sound right. It wasn't natural. The drumming was still going, louder now, like it was creeping up on us from every direction. Sarah's eyes were wide, her flashlight shaking in her hand. Guys, this is messed up. Let's just go back. I don't care about the trail. Yeah, I muttered, my throat dry. Good idea. But then Emily spoke up, her voice small and trembling. What if we can't? We all turned to look at her. She had this pale, haunted expression on her face, like she was seeing something we couldn't. I waved her off, trying to keep it together. Come on, we just came down one trail. We'll turn around and we'll be back at camp in 10 minutes, tops. At least, that's what I hoped. We started back, moving faster now, but the woods weren't having it. The fog thickened, swirling around us like it had a mind of its own. The trees seemed to shift, closing in, and no matter how far we walked, the drumming just kept getting louder. And that whisper, my name, soft but clear, kept coming back, over and over, making my skin crawl. Jake. It hissed again, and this time it wasn't just me who heard it. Nate spun around, his flashlight flickering like something out of a horror movie. Whoever's doing this, knock it off! It's not funny! But no one was laughing. We kept pushing forward, trying to retrace our steps, but it was like the forest didn't want us to leave. I don't know how to explain it, but the trail we came down, gone. The trees were different now, taller, and everything looked the same in every direction, just endless rows of thick trunks and that damn fog. Guys, Sarah's voice was shaky, barely a whisper. I don't think we're alone. No one said anything, but we all felt it, that creeping sensation that we were being watched. The drumming stopped all at once like someone had flipped a switch, and in the silence I heard it again, closer this time. Jake. And that's when I saw something move between the trees. A shadow. Just for a second, but it was there, I wasn't imagining it. Run, I whispered. I didn't need to say it twice. As soon as that word, run, left my mouth, we were off. No one hesitated. The second I saw that shadow moving between the trees, it was like something deep inside me kicked in, like survival mode or whatever. My legs took off on their own, and I could hear the others right behind me, their footsteps crashing through the underbrush, their panicked breathing echoing in the still, eerie air. The fog was thicker now, so thick that my flashlight was pretty much useless. I could barely see 3 feet in front of me, and the trees, God, they were everywhere, like they'd grown closer together just to trap us in. It felt like we were running in circles, but none of us slowed down to check. We were too scared, too desperate to get away from whatever was following us. I don't know how long we ran. It could have been 5 minutes or 15. I lost all sense of time. But eventually, Nate's voice cut through the pounding in my ears. Jake, we gotta stop, man! I turned, almost tripping over a root, and saw him stumbling to a halt, hunched over, gasping for air. Sarah collapsed beside him, her chest heaving as she struggled to catch her breath. Emily and Kevin weren't far behind, and they looked just as wrecked. My own lungs felt like they were on fire, but I couldn't stop looking around, searching for whatever it was. But the weirdest thing? The forest was silent, no drumming, no whispers, just the sound of us trying not to hyperventilate. I don't get it, Nate wheezed. We should have hit the camp by now, right? I mean, it wasn't that far. He was right. We'd been running for what felt like forever, but there was no sign of the camp, no sign of any familiar landmarks. It was like the forest had swallowed us whole. "We're lost," Sarah muttered, her voice shaking. "How the hell are we lost?" "I don't know," I admitted, my hands shaking too. "But something's out here with us. I saw it. I felt it." Emily's eyes were wide with panic. "What did you see?" I swallowed hard, trying to push down the fear bubbling up inside me. I don't know. A shadow, something moving. But it wasn't normal. It felt wrong. Kevin finally spoke up, his voice low and scared. "You think it's the same thing that's been whispering your name?" I didn't answer. I couldn't. The truth was, I had no idea what was going on, but I knew one thing for sure. This wasn't some prank or local legend. This was real, and it was getting worse. Suddenly, from behind us, we heard a twig snap. I whipped around, my heart hammering in my chest. The fog shifted, just enough for us to see something moving in the distance. Dark, tall, and slow, like it was watching, waiting. "Oh, God," Emily whispered. Before any of us could move, that voice came again, clear as day. "Jake," it called, dragging my name out like it knew me. This time I didn't tell them to run. We just did. We ran again, but this time it felt different. More desperate, like no matter how fast we moved, it was right behind us. My legs were burning, my heart pounding in my ears, but all I could think about was that voice. The way it said my name, like it had some kind of hold on me, like it was pulling me toward it. No one talked. We didn't have the breath for it. We just crashed through the trees, dodging roots and low-hanging branches as best we could, but the fog was messing with everything. It wrapped around us, thick and cold, making it impossible to see where we were going or even where we'd been. The worst part? The sounds weren't right anymore. I swear, every snap of a branch or rustle of leaves seemed to echo from the wrong direction, like the forest itself was trying to confuse us. I don't know how long we ran before Sarah finally stumbled, hitting the ground hard. "I can't," she gasped, clutching her ankle. We all skidded to a stop, breathless and terrified. I dropped to my knees beside her, helping her up, but she winced in pain. "Twisted it," she muttered, tears in her eyes. "Shit," Nate groaned, rubbing his hands over his face like he was trying to wake himself from a nightmare. "What the hell do we do now?" I looked around, trying to think, trying to find any sign of where we were, but nothing looked familiar. The trees were too close, too tall, and the fog was so thick it felt like it was pressing in on us. Emily was pacing back and forth, whispering to herself, while Kevin stood frozen, staring into the darkness like he was waiting for that thing to pop out any second. "Okay," I said, trying to keep my voice steady even though I felt like I was losing it. "We can't keep running. We need to find shelter or something. Just somewhere to hide until we figure this out." "Figure this out?" Kevin snapped, his voice shaking. "What the hell is there to figure out, Jake? We're stuck in the middle of a freaking horror movie and you want to figure this out?" I didn't have an answer. He was right. None of this made sense. The forest, the fog, that thing, none of it was normal. But sitting around panicking wasn't going to help, and I needed to get them moving before we all lost it. "Look," I said, standing up and grabbing Sarah's arm to help her. "We'll find somewhere. There's got to be an old cabin or something around here. We can't be that far from camp." Nate nodded, but the doubt in his eyes told me he wasn't buying it. None of them were. Hell, I wasn't even sure I believed it myself. But what choice did we have? We couldn't just stay out here in the open, waiting for whatever was hunting us to catch up. "Fine," Kevin muttered. "Lead the way." We started walking again, slower this time, dragging Sarah with us, but the feeling that something was watching hadn't gone away. It was stronger now, like it was getting closer, and then in the distance, we saw a light. I thought maybe we were saved when I saw that light. It was faint, barely cutting through the fog, but it was there, and in that moment, it felt like a lifeline, like we weren't totally screwed yet. Maybe it was a cabin, or another group of campers, or hell, maybe even someone from the town coming to check on us. "Look," I pointed ahead, "there's something out there." Everyone stopped, squinting through the fog. For a second, nobody said a word. It was like we all wanted to believe that light was our ticket out of this nightmare. Even Kevin, who'd been acting all tough, had this look of hope flash across his face. "Could be the camp," Nate said, his voice hoarse. Or, I don't know, maybe somebody else. Yeah, I said, trying to sound confident even though something in my gut told me it wasn't right. We gotta check it out. With Sarah limping between us, we headed toward the light, moving slow and quiet, like we didn't want to spook whatever was out there. I could feel the tension between us, this unspoken fear that maybe this wasn't the kind of light we should be running to. But we were desperate, too freaked out to think straight. As we got closer, the light started to flicker. Like it wasn't solid. Like it was, I don't know, dancing? That's when I realized it wasn't coming from a cabin or a flashlight. It was fire. A small flickering flame, burning in the middle of a clearing. No one else around, no sign of any kind of camp. Just the fire, glowing softly in the mist. "What the hell?" Emily whispered, her voice shaky. We stopped at the edge of the clearing, staring at the fire like it was some kind of trap, which, let's be real, it probably was. But we were too tired, too scared to care. It felt safer than the dark woods behind us, where that thing was still out there, watching. "I don't like this," Kevin muttered, but backing up a step. "This doesn't feel right, man." "I know," I admitted, glancing around, trying to make sense of it. "But what else are we supposed to do? We can't keep running forever." "We could sit here for the night," Nate suggested. "Regroup, figure out a plan." I wanted to agree, I really did. But the closer I looked at that fire, the more off it seemed, like it wasn't natural. The flames didn't move like real fire. They swayed, sure, but there wasn't any heat, no crackling. Just that eerie, soft glow barely illuminating the ground around it. Then Sarah, still leaning on me, whispered, "Guys, look." I followed her gaze and felt my blood run cold. Around the fire, just beyond the circle of light, there were figures. Dark, shadowy figures standing there, motionless, watching us. I froze. My heart pounded in my chest as I realized we hadn't found safety. We'd walked straight into the trap, and now, whatever was out there, it wasn't just watching anymore. It was waiting. We stood there, frozen, staring at the figures around the fire. They didn't move, didn't make a sound, just stood there like shadows come to life. My skin crawled, every instinct in my body screaming at me to run, but my feet wouldn't move. It was like the air got thick, pressing down on us, making it hard to even breathe. Nate was the first to speak, his voice barely above a whisper. "What the hell are those?" "I don't know, man," I muttered, eyes locked on the closest figure. It was tall, way taller than any of us, but it didn't have a face, just this black, featureless outline. "But we gotta get out of here." Kevin shook his head, stepping back slowly. "We're surrounded. Where the hell are we supposed to go?" He was right. Those things had us boxed in. Every direction I looked, there was another one, standing just at the edge of the light, like they were waiting for something. I couldn't help but feel like they were toying with us, like they knew we were trapped and they were just watching, enjoying it. "I don't care," I snapped, adrenaline kicking in. "We have to try something. Staying here isn't an option." Emily, who had been silent up until now, finally broke down. Tears spilled down her face, her voice trembling. "We're gonna die out here, aren't we?" "No," I said, though even I didn't believe it. "We're not gonna die. We're getting out of this." "But how?" I had no idea. My mind was racing, trying to figure out a way to get past those things, but nothing made sense anymore. This wasn't a normal situation. We weren't being chased by some wild animal or an axe-wielding maniac. This was something else, something we weren't prepared for. Sarah clung to me, her grip tightening as one of the figures seemed to shift, like it was taking a step toward us. "Jake, do something." I swallowed hard, fighting the rising panic. Okay, we move together, all right? Stick close. Maybe we can push through them." "You think that's gonna work?" Kevin hissed, his face pale. "They don't look like they're just gonna let us walk away." "I don't know," I admitted, "but we don't have a choice." Nate nodded, his jaw clenched. "We go together, fast. Don't stop, no matter what." I looked at the others, seeing the fear in their eyes, but there was no time for second guessing. I took a deep breath, my pulse pounding in my ears. "Ready?" No one answered, but they all moved in closer, like we were bracing ourselves for a fight we didn't stand a chance of winning. Then, with one final look at those figures, I took the first step. The others followed, huddling together as we moved toward the nearest gap between two of the shadows. My heart raced as we got closer, every step feeling like it could be our last. And then, as we broke the line, one of them reached out. I swear I felt it. Cold, sharp fingers brushed against my arm, and I heard the most haunting whisper, "Jake?" The second I heard my name, my blood ran cold. That voice wasn't one of my friends. It was something else, something wrong. I yanked my arm away, stumbling forward as my heart pounded like a jackhammer in my chest. For a second, everything felt too slow, like I was stuck in a nightmare I couldn't wake up from. The others didn't seem to hear it though, or maybe they were too focused on getting the hell out of there. Nate grabbed my shoulder, pulling me along as we pushed through the thick mist. I couldn't shake the feeling that those fingers, those cold, unnatural fingers, had left something behind, like they'd left a mark on me. But I didn't stop to check. I couldn't. "Come on, man, move." Nate's voice snapped me out of it, and I realized we were almost through the line of figures. But as we ran, I could feel their eyes, or whatever they had, on me, watching, waiting. We stumbled through the trees, Sarah and Emily struggling to keep up. The fog was so thick now, it was like we were wading through it. Every time I glanced over my shoulder, I swore I saw one of those shadows following us, just out of reach, lurking in the darkness. "Where the hell are we going?" Kevin shouted from behind me. "We can't see anything." "I don't know," I yelled back, frustration creeping into my voice. "Just keep moving. We can't stop." But no matter how far we ran, that voice, it wouldn't leave me alone. It was faint, like a whisper carried on the wind, but it was there, persistent, haunting. "Jake, Jake." It knew my name, and every time I heard it, a chill crawled down my spine. I didn't dare tell the others about it. They were freaked out enough already. If I mentioned it, they'd think I was losing it. Hell, maybe I was. Suddenly, Emily let out a sharp cry, and I whipped around just in time to see her trip over a root, crashing hard into the ground. "Emily!" Sarah was by her side in seconds, helping her up, but Emily's ankle was twisted at a bad angle. She wasn't going anywhere fast. I can't run anymore," Emily gasped, her face twisted in pain. "It hurts too much." "We don't have time for this," Kevin snapped, panic lacing his voice. "We have to keep moving or those things are gonna—" "Shut up, Kevin." I cut him off, my own fear bubbling up. "We're not leaving anyone behind." But in the back of my mind, I knew he was right. Those shadows were getting closer. I could feel them, pressing in on us from every side. We were running out of options, out of time. Nate looked around, desperate. What do? We can't just wait here. I felt the weight of it all crashing down on me. The guilt, the fear, the voice in the back of my head whispering my name over and over again. "We're gonna have to fight," I muttered, barely believing the words myself. Because at this point, what other choice did we have? I could feel the panic spreading like wildfire among us. We weren't built for this. None of us were. But here we were, stuck in the middle of nowhere with shadows closing in and Emily barely able to walk. My mind raced, grasping at straws. How the hell were we supposed to fight that? "Jake," Sarah's voice broke through the fog in my head, shaky but determined. "We can't stay here. What are we gonna do?" I looked around, trying to catch my breath, trying to think. I felt that creeping sensation again, those invisible eyes on my back. The whisper had stopped for now, but I knew it wasn't gone. It was waiting, like everything else in this damn forest. We need to find shelter," I said, though it felt like I was making it up as I went. "Somewhere we can hide, regroup. Just for a little while." "Shelter?" Kevin snorted, his voice edged with hysteria. "There's nothing out here, man. Just trees. More trees and whatever the hell those things are." "Shut up, Kev," Nate growled, stepping forward. "Jake's right. We can't keep running with Emily like this. If we stay out here, we're screwed." Emily let out a whimper, clutching her ankle. I felt like crap for even thinking about leaving her behind. That wasn't an option. Not if I could help it. "There's gotta be something," I muttered, scanning the trees. The shadows were still there, shifting just at the edge of our vision, like they were playing with us, taunting us. And then, through the mist, I saw it. A cabin. Old, run down, but it was there, half hidden behind a mess of overgrown branches. My pulse quickened. It didn't look like much, but it was better than nothing. At least it had walls. "There," I pointed, already moving toward it. "Come on, we'll get inside and figure it out from there." We half-dragged, half-carried Emily, her breathing ragged as we reached the cabin. The door was barely hanging on its hinges, creaking as I pushed it open. The inside smelled like rot and mildew, but it was shelter. It had 4 walls and a roof, and that was all that mattered right now. Once we were inside, we barricaded the door with whatever we could find. Old, broken furniture, anything heavy enough to keep them out. The air was thick with our fear, everyone's eyes darting to the windows, watching for any sign of movement outside. For a moment, it was quiet. Too quiet. "I don't like this," Sarah whispered, her voice barely audible. "It's like they're waiting for something." "They are," I muttered, pacing the small, cramped room. The whisper hadn't come back yet, but I knew it would. They're just biding their time. And that's when I heard it again. "Jake, Jake." The voice was louder now, more insistent, like it was right next to me. My stomach twisted into knots. This wasn't just about survival anymore. Something was coming for me, and I had no idea how to stop it. "They're not going to stay out there forever." "Geth," Nate said, his face pale. "What's the plan?" I didn't have an answer. We were trapped, and deep down I knew this cabin wouldn't hold them off for long. Whatever was out there, it was coming. We were huddled together in that rundown cabin, every creak and groan of the old wood making my skin crawl. The fog outside seemed to be closing in, like it was trying to squeeze us into a tighter spot. We had a brief reprieve, but that sense of uneasy calm was worse than any outright attack. At least then we'd know what we were dealing with. Emily was sitting in a corner, her leg propped up on a makeshift cushion, tears streaking down her face as she tried to breathe through the pain. Sarah was beside her, trying to comfort her with shaky words and gentle touches. Kevin was pacing, his eyes darting from the door to the windows, clearly on edge. Nate and I were trying to make sense of what was happening, though my own thoughts felt like a tangled mess of fear and frustration. "All right, listen up," I said, trying to sound more confident than I felt. "We need to figure out what we're up against and how to deal with it. We can't just sit here and wait." "Yeah, great plan," Kevin snapped, his voice sharp. "But how do you fight something you can't even see?" "I don't know," I admitted, feeling the weight of their eyes on me. "But we need to try something. Anything. If those things get in here, we're screwed." As if on cue, there was a soft thud against the cabin walls, making everyone jump. Sarah's eyes widened in fear, and Emily's breathing quickened. The shadows outside seemed to press closer, as if they were trying to push through the very walls of the cabin. "What was that?" Nate's voice was low, almost drowned out by the pounding in my ears. "I don't know," I said, trying to steady my own trembling hands. "But we need to keep our eyes open. They're not just going to give up." I glanced around the room, trying to think of any possible weapon we could use. There was nothing much, just broken furniture, old tools, and cobwebs. My mind raced, grasping at any kind of plan, but nothing seemed to fit. Another noise, this time louder, a scraping sound, like nails on a chalkboard. It came from the door, and we all froze, holding our breath. I could almost feel the pressure of the unseen presence outside, pressing against the door as if trying to get in. "Jake," Emily's voice was barely a whisper. "They're coming, aren't they?" I looked at her, my heart sinking. I don't know, but we need to be ready." We gathered around the door, ready to fight whatever came through. I felt the weight of responsibility crash down on me like a tidal wave. It was my idea to come out here, my mistake to push us into this mess. The door shuddered as something slammed into it from the other side. I could hear the scraping getting louder, more frantic. We braced ourselves, knowing that once that door gave way, we'd be facing whatever those shadows were head on. Then, in the midst of all this chaos, I heard it again. "Jake, Jake." The voice was louder, clearer, and it sent a chill down my spine. It wasn't just a whisper now, it was a call, a command, pulling me toward the darkness. I turned to the others, fear in my eyes. "They want me," I said, my voice trembling. "They want me to come outside." Sarah's face went pale. "No, Jake, you can't go out there." But I knew, deep down I knew I had to. Whatever it was, it wouldn't stop until it got what it wanted. And if that meant facing it head on, then that's what I had to do. "We're running out of time," I said, steeling myself. "I have to go. You all stay here. I'll try to figure out a way to stop this." The terror on their faces was almost too much to bear, but I knew I had no other choice. I took a deep breath, pushing the door open, stepping out into the swirling fog and the darkened forest beyond. The moment I stepped out of that cabin, I felt a chill that had nothing to do with the cold. It was like the fog itself was reaching out, wrapping around me with its icy fingers. I could barely see a few feet in front of me, but I could feel the oppressive weight of the darkness pressing down. The air was thick, heavy, and every breath felt like I was swallowing smoke. Jake. The voice was back, more insistent this time, echoing through the fog. It was like a taunt, a cruel reminder of how screwed I was. I tried to follow the sound, though it was hard to tell which direction it was coming from. Everything looked the same in this damned mist. Trees looming like giants, branches reaching out like skeletal fingers. I moved cautiously, my footsteps muffled by the fog. Every sound seemed amplified, the crack of a twig, the rustle of leaves. I kept expecting to turn around and find one of those shadows right behind me, but I forced myself to keep going. I had to find whatever was causing this, whatever was making that damn voice call my name. The further I went, the more the fog seemed to close in. It was like I was walking through a living thing, something that was wrapping itself around me, suffocating me. I tried to keep my breathing steady, but my heart was racing so fast, I thought it might burst out of my chest. And then I saw it, a figure standing in the middle of a clearing, barely visible through the thick fog. It was tall, impossibly tall, and shrouded in darkness. The shape was familiar, but I couldn't quite make out the details. It was like it was deliberately staying in the shadows, just out of reach of the little light that filtered through. Jake. The voice came again, this time right next to me. I jumped, spinning around, but there was nothing there. The fog was just as thick, just as unnerving. Come closer. I took a tentative step forward, felt my hands shaking. The figure in the clearing seemed to move slightly, as if it was beckoning me. I had to fight every instinct telling me to turn back. If I wanted to end this, I needed to face whatever this was. As I stepped into the clearing, the figure became clearer, if only just. It was like staring at a shadow that had a life of its own, a mass of darkness that seemed to pulse and writhe. There were eyes, or what looked like eyes, glowing faintly in the darkness. They followed my every move, making my skin crawl. "You're the one who disturbed my slumber," the figure said, its voice low and chilling. It was the same voice I'd heard before, but now it was clear and full of menace. "You should never have come here." "I didn't know," I said, my voice barely more than a whisper. "I didn't know any of this was real. I just wanted to get out." The figure seemed to laugh, a sound like nails scraping on a chalkboard. "Now you've awakened me, and you can't undo it. The forest is mine, and so are you." Panic surged through me, but I forced myself to stay calm. "What do you want from me? What do you want me to do?" The figure's eyes seemed to glow brighter, and I could feel the darkness around me growing heavier. "You must make a choice, Jake. You can't hide from the truth. You must either become part of the forest or free yourself by sacrificing someone else." The weight of the choice hit me like a ton of bricks. There was no easy way out. I had to make a decision, and every second felt like a lifetime. The figure's presence was overwhelming, and I felt like I was suffocating under the weight of its power. I took a deep breath, knowing whatever I decided next would determine the fate of my friends and myself. I just hoped I could find a way to turn this nightmare around before it was too late. The weight of the figure's words crashed down on me like a tidal wave. It felt like every bit of energy was draining out of me, leaving me empty and numb. I couldn't let this thing win. Not after everything we'd been through. I had to find a way to put an end to this madness. The figure's eyes bored into me, glowing with an intensity that made me want to turn and run. But there was nowhere to run, and I knew it. The forest was alive, and it wasn't going to let me escape easily. I had to make a choice, and it had to be the right one. The lives of my friends depended on it. "All right," I said, trying to sound braver than I felt. "I'll do whatever it takes. Just tell me what I need to do." The figure's dark form seemed to shiver with anticipation. "You must choose someone to sacrifice, or you'll become one with the forest. Choose wisely, Jake. The price of freedom is steep." My heart pounded in my chest as I thought about my friends back at the cabin. Emily, Sarah, Kevin, Nate. Each one of them had their own fears and struggles, and I couldn't bear the thought of losing any of them. But I also couldn't let this thing take over. I can't do this," I said, my voice cracking. "There's got to be another way." The figure's eyes narrowed. "No other way. The forest demands a price. It always has." Desperation clawed at me. I needed to buy time, to figure out a way to beat this thing without losing anyone. I glanced around the clearing. trying to find something, anything that might help. And then it hit me. The symbols I'd seen earlier, the ones etched into the trees and rocks. Wait, I said, my mind racing. I saw those symbols in the forest. Maybe they have something to do with stopping you. The figure's presence seemed to waver for a moment. You're not the first to try, and you won't be the last. But if you think those symbols will save you, you're sorely mistaken. Ignoring its taunts, I turned and ran back to the cabin, the fog swirling around me. My friends were still huddled together, fear etched on their faces. I could see the strain in their eyes, the exhaustion that mirrored my own. Listen up, I said, trying to keep my voice steady. I think I've figured out a way to stop this thing. Remember the symbols? They might be our way out. Emily looked up, her eyes filled with hope and pain. What do we do? We need to find those symbols and recreate the ritual, I said, trying to sound confident. It's our best shot. Nate, who had been pacing nervously, nodded. Let's do it, whatever it takes. We gathered what we could, flashlights, whatever tools we could find, and set out into the forest again. The fog seemed to have a mind of its own, thickening and swirling as we moved. But we pushed on, driven by the slim hope that we could still fix this. We reached the symbols, barely visible in the dim light. We worked quickly, trying to replicate the patterns as best as we could. The figure's dark form loomed in the distance, its presence a constant reminder of how close we were to losing everything. As we completed the symbols, a strange calm fell over the forest. The fog seemed to recede, and the oppressive weight lifted just a bit. I could feel the tension in my shoulders ease, though the figure was still there, watching. Is it working? Kevin asked, his voice tight with anxiety. I hope so, I said, my eyes on the figure. Just a little longer. The figure let out a roar, a sound that shook the very trees around us. It seemed to writhe and distort, its dark form convulsing. I felt a rush of wind, and then just as suddenly the figure was gone. The forest was quiet again. We stood there, panting and exhausted, the reality of what we just faced sinking in. The forest felt different, less oppressive, somehow lighter. We'd done it. We'd managed to turn things around. I looked at my friends, relief washing over me. We did it, I said, my voice barely more than a whisper. We survived. As we made our way back to the cabin, the fog lifting and the night seeming a little less dark, I knew one thing for sure. Cedar Hollow would never be the same. But we'd face the darkness and come out the other side. And that, for now, was enough. Hey everyone, I hope you enjoyed today's story. If you did, it would mean the world to me if you could hit that subscribe button and join our community. Your support not only keeps the channel going, but also helps us bring more thrilling, spine-chilling content to you. Don't forget to click the notification bell so you never miss out on our latest uploads. And if you liked what you saw, a thumbs up goes a long way in letting me know that you want more. Before you go, make sure to check out the video playing on the screen right now. It's another gripping story you won't want to miss, and it's a perfect way to stay connected and dive deeper into the world of suspense and horror. Thank you so much for being a part of this journey. Your engagement and enthusiasm are what keep this channel alive and thriving. Stay tuned for more, and remember, the darkest stories are often the most unforgettable. See you next time.